Welcome to 2025.
Oh, it didn't go live on Instagram. And then
What is this, an amateur production?
way to start the
What kind
year.
of show is this?
Oh my goodness. I gotta give you a new key.
No, I have to end the stream and we have to do it like
All right.
actually try to give me yeah, I have to.
Okay.
Oh, okay. You're already live. If you need to change the stream key, remove this session from the stream, then re-add it. So I'm going to remove it while we're live and then re-add it. Okay, good. So we don't have to cut down the whole stream on the other platforms.
Okay.
All right. I just went live on Instagram again, so you have to press the go live.
It's not letting me. Well, here we go. Now it is. Great. So now we're live. Happy New Year.
Welcome to the show.
The show.
Infinite Show.
The Infinite Show.
The show that sometimes streams live.
Now with less music.
I just have to like voice my frustration that it's so stupid that you can't just play little snippets of music while you're streaming. Like,
I guess they could somebody could basically just stream them playing really popular songs and then build up their following that way.
But
I see that
the logo on your shirt needs to be cleared. Like like it's because the recording companies feel like the internet stole their revenue streams, so they became overly litigious. But like people play music on radio shows and talk shows.
Yeah.
And like they figured out a way for the content creators to get paid continuously. Yeah. Like people play music on YouTube more than any other platform. It's the second most used search engine on the internet. So YouTube has licensing agreements with all of the content creators, like the songwriters and the mechanical license holders, all through ASCAP and BMI or what those agencies that represent songwriters. And
well, you can put songs on Reels. Maybe it's something live when it becomes an issue. I don't know. So
I mean, we should definitely be able to play snippets of songs and then do critical evaluations of them.
Yeah, but
that is not in violation of any copyright law.
No.
Now, if you use the same intro song for every episode and you played the whole song, you should probably have that cleared in some capacity.
But it's just on Instagram.
Well, Instagram's owned by Facebook, so Facebook has a policy around using music on live streams or in videos.
I just picked my lights out. I want to set up my stand so that I can get some juice coming to my legs. I'm dealing with this. Here we go. Ooh. Looks like Hazy's hair when it doesn't get brushed. Okay. Gotta untangle the wires. So I'm sending out my first newsletter tomorrow in first one in 2.5 years or something.
Amazing.
Yeah. Long time coming.
The Infinite newsletter.
Yes. Sorry, this is tangled. And then that image that I was working with.
Yep. The one with your brain exploding with all the cool things.
Yeah, So I just went, I went nuts with it. I added so much more stuff to it, and then I added like photos of my youth and my family, and like different things, and then I started by just kind of thinking about like what's just some like fun random shit, because anything could be possible. And we did that, and then it's like, even though it could be anything, you kind of start to run out of ideas that are like interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but then I was like, oh, let me have my kids in there, a little homage. And then from there, it was like, oh, well,
And that's when you added the peanut butter sandwich that wants to be a shark.
Oh, I should have. I didn't add that, but I should have. Oh, it looks like. Hang on one sec. It's probably the least compelling 2 minutes of live stream video in the history of YouTube. I had to plug in my machine here, my stim machine. Dude, so much shit around. Just wires and stuff. But anyway, I'm good now. So but then I was like, oh, let me add some stuff that like I'm into, and then that's when it really started to open up, because it was like my life, and I could add, family things, or like Weird Al and Kirk Gibson and
Totally.
Balki Bartokomous and Eric Stoltz's Mask, and like all these things that were like significant in my life for various reasons.
Amazing.
Yeah. So what we'll end up doing, I'll have it on the banner of the newsletter. I don't know if it'll be for the show or not. But maybe. I was thinking it would be for just everything that's the infinite, like we were talking about with Spaceballs. It was like infinite the newsletter, infinite the live stream, the infinite, whatever it is. Okay. And like what's been coming through for me so strong was just tell the truth. Tell the truth. There's like a truth that wants to be spoken. I've just been feeling the depth of this portals and the synchronicity and the evolution that we're experiencing, and like going down rabbit holes and shit. It's kind of been in a process.
What is the truth?
I'm going to answer that question by not answering that question.
Could you do me a favor and not answer that question into the microphone?
Is this on?
Yeah, there we go. Now there's like
Okay.
a sweet spot for the microphone where I hear your voice with perfect intimacy. It
Should I put
captures.
this up?
Yeah.
And the truth is that there is a infinite, singular, indestructible, non-creatable, non-physical energy. And it is everything and all things. And if you were to ask, is it fill in the blank? The answer would be yes. Is it me? Yes. Is it thoughts? Yes. Is it God? Yes. So on and so forth. And we're having this very focused experience as human beings with our identities and our bodies and our dreams and our problems and our families and everything in the physical world. And it all feels so real. And it is real. It's as real as a dream is. Because you could tell me about a dream that you had. And I could say, well, that's not real. You're like, sure it is. I had this dream. But did it actually happen? I could argue yes, and I could argue no. And the more that you really think about it, the more accurate answer is yes. The dream actually happened because you experienced it. But you could also argue no, that it wasn't real. And so the inversion of that is that we are the dream. We are in the lucid dream. We are the physicality expressed from the infinite source energy consciousness. But we don't see ourselves that way or feel ourselves that way. And shit's going to get really crazy because there's so much about the way that this world operates that's shifting, changing. And I continue to come into these schools of thought or these ideas that, like, how am I to know that when I was born and came into this existence, everything started, including history? Like, like Total Recall. And there's no way to disprove that. I don't know that I believe it, but there's really no way to disprove it. And then so getting into that expanded level of awareness and consciousness, whether it's true or not, but I think it's true. I don't know that it's true what I just said in terms of coming into an existence that didn't exist until I, became individuated conscious. But the truth that everything's just energy manifested in physical form. And that can be very discombobulating for the ego. And then you start to look at, well, what exactly is happening here? And how is this planet operating? What are our systems that we're all subscribing to and adhering to, and the shifts that are coming? It can get quite existential. From aliens to lizard people to this one guy that I found recently. has a very compelling case. And he's not the only person I've seen to share this, but it's like interesting that finding actors or people that are just playing other people and looking at a lot of very famous people that have died. JFK, Robin Williams, Michael Jackson, Prince, Marilyn Monroe, and then doing his detective work, proving as best he can, I guess, you don't have to believe it, but making a case that there's somebody else who who's famous, who is that person playing that person. And he's got dozens of these. And it's like, well, shit, what's actually happening here? Maybe that's not real, but maybe it is. But maybe everything's real, and we get to choose which timeline we want to adhere to. Maybe in some timelines that's real, and in some timelines it's not. And in some timelines it's lizard people. Where's the collective? So those are some of the thoughts that have been going around in my mind.
Will you do me a favor?
Hmm.
We go like this. Your microphone's not on.
Interesting. Okay.
All right, the meaning of truth. Take two.
Oh, here's why.
Now it's on. Now it's on. Now it's on. There's just, but what does it all come down to? Is this thing that, like, fuck, if I'm creating this whole thing and there's truly nothing to be afraid of, and where is fear? And where does fear show up? And how do we hold ourselves back? And like guilt or shame or anxiety or worry or judgment, all these things. And some dire warnings coming from some channels of what's going to happen. And beautiful things as well. And who knows, but it's like our whole planet, the whole economic system of the Western world, and particularly the United States, is built on a foundation of nothing. We print our own money. And we can print as much of it as we want. Some people just decide, should we make more or should we make less? And we have a $40 trillion debt. The United States has a what does it even mean? Then there's the aliens are coming, and there's the crazy amounts of war. Do you know there's more? I'm such a downer right now. Do you know there's more slaves on the planet right now than any time in human history?
I've heard that said.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's true. I mean, there's more people on the planet, so it would make sense that there could be way more slaves than 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize how much slavery was endemic in the ancient world. It's not just a story of 300 years ago in America that slavery became an institutionalized thing. Like that Jewish slaves built the Colosseum in Rome using plunder from the temple that the Romans sacked after they had a series of multiple emperors that died trying to claim the throne. And then the general named Vespasian. I'm too tired. I'm so sorry. His son was named Titus. Anyway, when he essentially claimed the throne as emperor of Rome, he ended the Julian Caesar, the Julian Claudian line, and he started a new line called the Flavian dynasty, which is also the beginning of the Roman Catholic Church. All the early church fathers were part of that Flavian dynasty, and they took on the moniker Flavian. So there's a whole story there about the early Roman Catholic Church. And Titus, the son of Vespasian, was sent back to the land of Israel to reconquer the Jews, because the Jews had been in rebellion now for a couple years, and quasi successfully. Like they beat out some Roman legions early in the war. They stole some eagle like battalions or whatever they're called, like the eagle. They took them into battle. It's like how countries take flags into battle, and like if you stole the other country's flag, that would be like a great dishonor. Like they stole the Roman imperial eagle and defeated a battalion. It was like a really big deal. It only happened a few other times in history. Like the Germans won a few wars like that, conquered some battalions, but the
Stole
Roman
the flag, and then everybody
stole the
had to
flag.
give up.
Right. Well, when they come, yeah, exactly. We're done. You got the flag. But like Rome, like if you like, if you thumbed your nose at the bear comes back even more angry.
Mhm.
So they
Sure.
really crushed this Jewish revolt. And that was the destruction of the Second Temple. That was the beginning of the second diaspora of the Jews. And I mention that because when the Romans reconquered the Jews, they brought back the lead Jewish general who was like leading the defense of the city of Jerusalem, and they sacrificed him like to their gods, like publicly executed him / sacrificed them to their gods, like practice human sacrifice,
Mhm.
ritual slaughter. And they also sacrificed 400 young Jewish boys just to appease the gods. And then they took the rest of the slaves that they brought back to Rome with them, and they used those slaves to build the Colosseum in Rome. The Colosseum in Rome, that is so famous for gladiators and all that kind of stuff, was built by Jewish slaves using plunder that they stole from the war campaign, basically the plunder of the temple. They financed the construction of the Colosseum using the gold and all the other precious jewels that they stole when they reconquered Jerusalem and they plundered the temple. And that's just one tiny example from history of like people being enslaved. I mean, there's so many other peoples that were enslaved throughout history. So there might be more slaves today if you just did a body count. I think that's plausible. I don't actually know the numbers or how they calculate them, but I don't know that there's more of a percentage of the population under enslavement than ancient history and antiquity, where I think it was much more prevalent than modern day people walking on the globe really truly understand. Like, the story of Sparta. Like, have you heard of Spartans or the word Sparta before?
Mm-hmm.
The Spartans were a warrior class that literally enslaved other people that were their neighbors and made them farm and become their servants so that they could only focus on war. They were like a hierarchical society built on being warriors / murderers, right? They enforced law through their sword, but they were essentially aristocrats that were the only ones that were allowed to truly wield the sword, while they enslaved their neighboring populations to farm for them and to put food on the table for them so they could focus on war. Weird.
We don't really hear that part about, we celebrate them a lot.
You don't hear, we are Sparta. You don't hear, we are enslavers.
Yeah.
We built our empire on the back of other people.
Yeah. Or otherwise, my middle school would have been the A.E. Wright slave traders, which doesn't sound nearly as good as the A.E. Wright Spartans. Yeah.
Tell me about some of the synchronicities that have been happening. It's been a few days since we got to drop in together.
Yeah. So, but all of that to say, I set that up, setting it up with those things of just becoming aware of them. Not that I'm not aware of them, but they've been, they've been more in my conscious awareness, those types of things. And so it creates this expansion of like, well, all of the things that I'm excited about or aligned about or feel a calling for, and the synchronicities that we were in. Augie came a few days ago, and that was really great. Just dropping in with him and it's like it just feels like the stories are coming true. You know, we are the next Christ, or the next Buddha is the Sangha. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Yay. You know, it's like, oh fuck. It's true. Like, it's happening. Um
Kind of like when you know something to be true, and then like so much time goes on, you kind of forget about it a little bit, and then you remember a little bit more, and you're like, oh my God, it was like that the whole time. I just
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what life is. Yeah. And then when you get these moments where it's like, at some point, I'm going to transition out of the body and not come back. And I'm not scared of that per se, but I'm aware of it. But I'm also aware in a more experiential way than I've shared previously that I'm already there. And it's like the suit just comes off. And when I become aware that I'm already there, it kind of shifts the approach. You know, when you just think about it conceptually, it's like, yeah, well, now I get to live, you know. But when you feel it sort of experientially, that's when it kind of brings up like, okay, what am I doing here? Like, what's happening? Why, like, true, not like, why am I here, but like, what is the plan? You know, like I, all these things we talk about, not even the plan, but it's like, and I don't know if I'm a little tired myself, but there's this core awareness of needing to be the cause and agency of the experience of my life. And there's
say that again. Say that piece of it again. I think I understood you, but it's such a profound statement. I want you to say it again.
Okay. I might not be able to say it exactly.
That's okay.
There's this deep awareness, it's an experiential awareness, get these flashes that everything that's happening is happening within my own consciousness. And so there's this awareness that I am the cause and have the agency to create my experience of life. And there's also fear. You know, look at all of our fears. Anything we're afraid of, we have fear of. And so much, maybe it's around money or taking care of the kids or growing up or poison in the food or all these things, all the, you know, shit that I brought up first. And so there's an access point, though, I think, to expand greater than all of it. And if truly we're here to learn how to love unconditionally, and that's the highest evolution of our spirit. And that really is like the path of the Christ. And
what makes you think that's the highest expression of
human in the infinite, anything goes because it's all things. But it makes sense to me that if we were to graduate to the next level, that it would be learning to love unconditionally. Now, I've heard some teachings that talked about that this dimension, third dimension and third density, I think it's about like knowing, or understanding, something like that. And then we're moving into this fourth density consciousness, which is more about which is about love, connectivity. But this concept of heaven, that it's a choice. It's a choice that your spirit and your soul makes, because there's nowhere else to go. It's just now. It's an expression and an extension of consciousness. The idea that there is no hell anywhere but on earth. And so the access point is through the actions and the thoughts and the intentions and our way of being. And so seemingly, if the goal is heaven, and that was something that I was resonant when I was writing or talking to Augie, it's like, I want to experience heaven on earth with my kids before I die. That's been coming through for me for like a long time. And similar to your question, he would ask very simple questions or just reflect them back. And I'd be like, God, I hadn't really thought about that. And it was like, well, what is heaven? And the contemplation that in Aramaic, the word for sky is the same as the word for heaven. So there's an interpretation. When we say our Father who art in heaven, it's also like saying our Father who art in the sky. And the sky is everywhere. And we are in the sky. And you look at the sun. The sun is this life force. All things come from the sun. And Ra from the Law of One talks about it as the logos, the love. It's like it's the creator, really the birther of life. And the contemplation of that birther of life in space, it's like God in heaven. The sun in the sky is God in heaven in physical expression. And so from that awareness, the idea of bringing heaven on earth is inverted, because earth is already in heaven. And so these are some of the things that I've been contemplating. And then getting into that, it's like at some point, I think before we die, before we actually transition out of the body, is an opportunity to, as Yeshua says, give up the dream of the dreamer, to remember there was never a dream. I also lost a shit ton of money on crypto.
What, in the last week?
Yeah. Like
Did you get the Christmas / Hanukkah present I sent to you?
I did. Thank you. The book. Thank you. I've been meaning to. Yeah.
I got you 2, because
you
one
did?
sent for Paolo when we all meet up.
Oh, okay. Amazing.
Basically,
only one came in.
I don't know where the other one is, but it
Hmm.
says it was delivered. But one's a soft bound and one's a hard bound, and I didn't know which one to get you, so I was like, "Oh, I'll just get one for Paolo too when we see him."
Thanks, man. I got the paperback, so I'll check if the hardcover came in. So what about that book was it that you wanted me to read it?
Well, on a personal level, Ken Wilber was somebody that truly opened up doors of perception for on my own path, on my own journey. In fact, when I read that exact book was the summer between my freshman year of college and sophomore year. And I'd read that book a little bit my freshman year. I kind of opened it up and teased reading it. And I knew there was like something very powerful inside of the pages, but I read in a very devotional way. So when I read, I like really read. And, there's a mystical way to read, right? Like you're letting the book and the contents of the book inside of your being, right? Like it's an erotic equation to read, right? So it's listening to music or watching film. And I say that because when I read this book, I was in a very transitional place with my being and my becoming. as a person wearing the spacesuit on this plane, right? And I went to Zimbabwe for 3 weeks between my freshman and sophomore year in college. I had a really profound experience in Africa. Kind of alluded to some of that when we were talking about dreams and that malaria medication I was on. But when I got home and I read that book in Zimbabwe, and then I read it again. I just read it once and then I immediately read it again. And there was so much profundity in like a very short book because it was answering so many things for me in such a simple way. It was helping me see things clearly. And most importantly, it gave me permission to make this leap of faith of consciousness inside of my being that then happened unexpectedly, in a parking lot outside of my temple that I also referred to on a prior show. There's something profound for me personally in this book, but I also know that this book is not for everyone and this author is not for everyone. It's not everyone who reads this book is not going to have that same series of experiences of awakening, But I really thought for a couple of reasons that this would be something that would excite you. A, you've talked about wanting to develop a rational like spirituality. I think Ken Wilber is the champion of that genre. Also, when you've talked about the art process a little bit and how you want to frame it, you've talked using psychological language, meaning language from psychology that references both Freud and, Carl Jung, let's say, and like entire movements of psychology. And I think Ken Wilber has a brilliant way to explain that. And that's not necessarily in this book, but if you like this book, I think there's a whole kind of other dimension of psychology literature that might super turn you on in a way that could help you refine the art process. So those were the 2 or 3 reasons why I wanted to send you the book.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it sounds super aligned and up my alley. It's funny, what comes up for me, hearing that this is the type of book that is aligned with things that I've been wanting to write about or coming through. There's the part of me that has me feel like, well, I don't want to read it. Like when I was in college, I was a film major and I probably saw less movies than like anybody in my class because it's like I didn't want to feel like I was taking anybody's ideas was one. And then another was like, sometimes I'd see stuff and be like, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm thinking, And I just got this new app, Headway, and they basically give you like 12, 15-minute summaries of books. And I've been hearing a lot about this new book, The Obstacle is the Way, by Guy Ryan Holiday. So Marianne Williamson mentioned it a couple times on her podcast, reading it with Aubrey. And so I did the summary on it, and they're basically fucking talking about the art process. And I'm just like, fuck. I mean, it's framed different, but there's the part of me. There's the part of me that's like, that's not the whole piece, but there's that wound or that writer or that part that's like, oh, I already did it. Or there, some people read it and they think I'm stealing from them and blah, 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 all that kind of story.
The guy that wrote, I haven't read the book. I'm familiar with the book. I've seen it kind of get out there and be impactful. But the process of transformation is a story of a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yeah.
And that's the art process.
Yeah.
And the way you are framing the art process is unique. And I'm saying that because there's not dozens, there's hundreds and thousands of different people that have articulated this movement of the soul through multiple stages of a transformational process.
But
plenty of room for another voice in that chorus.
Oh, totally. And I appreciate that, of like the reminder, and there always is. And that's what I tell the people I work with or talk to that have ideas. It's just Starbucks wasn't the first coffee company. Google wasn't the first search engine. And but some of the language he was using was very, very similar. And look, it's so that just popped up. But anyway, that's not to say that it's probably not an amazing book, and I'm so glad it exists. And the more people that could connect to this, and it doesn't matter where it comes from, the better, and super aligned with it. But being aware of that small, scared voice.
Mm.
But it's funny because that's well, like even with the Ken Wilber book, that kind of came up, and it was like, oh well, I better write my book first and then read his.
Do you know who recommended this book for me to read? Who in my life had the genius insight of inspiration and intuition to say, hey, I think you should check this book out?
Hmm.
My guitar teacher.
Hmm.
My guitar teacher, the man who taught me to play the guitar and write songs more than anybody else in my life, like truly influenced me on such a soulful level.
Hmm.
When I came back, I don't know if it was Thanksgiving break, after being gone for my freshman year of college, you know, for the first time, like away in that special way when you go off to college. And I came back home and I got to see people that I knew, but now I'm in this different place in my life. And I met up with my guitar teacher just to let him know how I was doing in life. And then I told him about all the thoughts I had and the experiences I was feeling. And he's like, you should read this book. The Marriage of Sense and Soul. It's such a beautiful frame. It's so simple. It's like Ken Wilber has other books and he has other ideas. And a lot of those ideas are crystallized and shared in a very succinct way in this book. But this book is such a brilliant frame for such an eternal question as to the relationship between science and religion, which is one of the core schisms of our age, right? Like the schism between the masculine and the feminine. Mm-hmm. The schism between science and religion, right? Like we go to a university and there's not actually a universal framework for knowledge. Like the different sciences don't have a way to talk to each other. Like even physics, which is like supposed to be the most fundamental science, there's not a universal theory of physics. Like there's a theory of really big things in the universe and it makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of proof and experiments and theories around it. And then there's the world of really, really, really small things in quantum theory. And like those two theories don't make sense together. There's not a university of physics that makes sense, much less biology and anthropology or literature or theater, or like all the different departments of a university don't actually have a way that all those things fit together to even call something a university. You see what I'm saying? Like,
well, so I do see what you're saying, but it's interesting because what came through for me is that there is one thing that brings it all together. Do you know what that is? The human being. The human is the elephant. All of these things communicate through the human in and of themselves, may have different variables, but the connectivity is through us. Does that land?
it's totally true. 100% true. What you're saying, 1,000,000% true. And the humanities department doesn't know how to talk to the physics department and vice versa.
Yes.
There's like a gigantic wall or schism between those worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, what bridges that schism? The human being. But we haven't realized that yet in the corridors of our academies. And so we teach people in school, but we don't have a theory of universal knowledge.
What is universal knowledge?
Knowledge about the universe?
Still, we don't have complete We don't have definitive universal knowledge. But I could also argue the opposite, that every single iota of knowledge we have is universal knowledge.
We started by asking the question at the beginning of this episode, what is truth? And we've been slowly pulling back some of the layers.
Mm-hmm.
But if
It's
you
all
say
truth.
something, there's no such thing as truth. If you make that claim, you're making a truth claim. You're making
Mhm.
a claim to truth.
Yes.
I think it is true that there is no such thing as truth. So you fall into this logical paradox.
Totally. It is impossible to make the statement, there is no such thing as truth, and have that be a true statement. That's a beautiful paradox.
Habermas called that contradiction a performative contradiction, because the speaker in the performance of speaking words is saying something that is paradoxically untrue.
A performative, what was the second word?
Contradiction.
A performative contradiction. I think that there are performative contradictions littered in our culture and our stories. I think some of the most glaring are with religion. And a lot of the Judeo-Christian religion, particularly a lot of the teachings around Jesus, I think, are wrought with performative. Forgot it again.
Contradictions.
Contradictions. I'm so tired. We're gonna have to start doing these earlier.
Or maybe we're not doing them late enough.
Performative Can I share some of my favorite performative contradictions?
Yeah.
The God of the Bible.
Which one? Because I hate to break it to the Bible lovers, but there's many gods referenced in the Bible by different names.
Yeah.
The God of El, the God of Abraham is not the same God as the God of Moses. Yahweh.
Mm.
They have different names and totally different lineages historically.
So it's the God that the Christians believe, or maybe that the religion teaches, the institution of the religion teaches, the God that judges whether or not you get into heaven or hell. That God. So that God, we're told, is an unconditionally loving God. It loves without condition. And hell, we're told, is eternal damnation. And so an unconditionally loving God and eternal damnation is a performative contradiction in the same story. They cannot exist in the same story. And then I've asked this with people before, and the response, either they'll be like, oh, I never thought about that. That's true. Or I'll get this response. The only thing God wants is your love, is for you to just accept, to accept, to receive his love. That's all you need to do to get into heaven and to not go to hell, to eternity. Just accept his love. That's it. And you could do it at any moment. And my response to that is, cool. That sounds like a condition. So you can't say that and your God is unconditional. If you want to say there's only one condition to get into heaven. My God loves unconditionally except for this one condition. Great. Otherwise, it's the same contradiction as truth. It can't be said. It doesn't work in the same story. You can't say, my God loves unconditionally, and here's the one condition that you need to adhere to.
Yeah, these mental puzzles, I don't think about those things anymore.
Those are the pieces. I think our world is filled with things that we're told that aren't true. And then we believe them. And then we believe them instead of believing our own instincts or our eyes or our intuition or our guidance or our heart or our cognition or our logic or our reason. And sometimes many of them or most of them. And when we allow for all of those things to take a back seat and to not trust those, but to trust what somebody else tells us, now we're slaves.
I was thinking about a version of this today, a little bit. I was thinking about how people choose to believe these like false idols of intuition or truth, almost like they're under a magic spell. I'll give you an example. Like, I really like the work of Nassim Haramein, the physicist. I know you've met him before, spoken to him. And I took one of his interesting ideas and I brought it to a guy that runs a physics journal. And I was like, hey, what do you think of this idea? And he was incapable of engaging with the idea. It was like somebody had pulled the wool over his eyes. Like, the drones are not inside here. What's the line from Star Wars? Do you know what line I'm talking about? Like,
No.
he just uses the force to con his way into one of the places they're trying to sneak into.
It reminds me of Lieutenant Frank Drebin standing in front of the firework warehouse as it's exploding and blowing up and it's absolute pandemonium. And he's in front saying, there's nothing to see here. Please disperse. And there's like people running out on fire.
Right.
Nothing to see here.
Anyway, so this guy who ran like a scientific journal, I was just trying to have like a spirited debate, not even a debate, just like engage in conversation.
Yeah.
Met up with him after sending him some content, some articles or something, and he would not engage. Like, as soon as he thought that this person held ideas that were outside of scientific norms, then he just thought that this person was not scientific and therefore not worthy of discussion.
Yeah.
And it made me think, and I don't, at the time I was probably frustrated, but also there was something like real inside of that intuition or that lesson of engaging with that person that like people consciously or unconsciously, but when I say conscious, I mean willfully, are holding wool over their own eyes.
Yeah.
Like, it's like they're not ready to see certain things or experience certain truths, and so it's almost like they have guardrails up, and these guardrails are almost like the horse blinders. Like, they're willfully not letting themselves see wider swaths of the energetic spectrum.
Yeah. But not aware that they're not willful, like have deceiving themselves to thinking that they're actually doing the thing that's best for them.
Right. And then people that ride on the mantle of things like science, and they'll ride or die, like they're like true blue scientists, are actually not doing the most fundamental things that are what they claim to believe, right? Like, I'm giving an example from science, but you gave an example from religion that are kind of the same example, that there's just like something fundamentally untrue about the words of Jesus and the message of Jesus. And then some of the ways that we see practitioners or followers of the Bible or of Jesus, the way they behave in the world, there's like a gigantic performative contradiction.
Mhm. Yeah, and even if it is like the words of him, whose words are they? There's this is pretty interesting. That whole thing with Billy Carson and Wes Huff that I told you about turned out it's still kind of happening, but it became this really big issue. And Wes was just on Rogan, which is huge. I haven't listened to it yet, but there's a lot. Maybe I'm just becoming more aware of it, or maybe it's becoming more prevalent. But there's a lot of conversation about Jesus and Yeshua, and more people are talking about. Um, well, I shouldn't say that because he's kind of been talked about a lot for a long time. But I think the conversation's expanding. I just feel it rising to the surface. I feel a lot of the things we've been talking about for years and years, and these prophecies and these ideas and these transitions and all this stuff. It's like I'm sometimes feel them, the experience of them. Um, and and then this newsletter I'm sending tomorrow, and like I told you, what has just been coming through for me was just tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth. And it's not that I'm trying to expose something.
Right. But the truth of what?
That's what I'm trying to find out. But that's what's coming through for me. I have this feeling of that there's like a truth that wants to be spoken. And I don't even know if it's an objective truth, but it's like my hose has been pinched.
You have an energetic kink. I think we all
Yeah.
I think we all do, and I think that kink is holding a lot of power.
Yeah.
I'm saying that because it's not just a dismemberment. It's not just a flaw or a fallacy. It's like the thing. It's the way.
Yeah.
The obstacle is the way.
Yes.
That thing that you think is your greatest weakness is actually your greatest strength.
Yes.
And that thing that you think is an energetic kink, that's like a hose being kinked, is actually holding the most powerful form of your energy vital.
Yeah. And why do we not express it? Because of fear. It could be fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of success. It could come from shame. It could come from so many different influences. But if it just came from love and surrender and truth and allowance, and that's where I come back to heaven. I mean, it's a concept, or an evolved society, like Bashar said in their society. It's just like this. Everyone is always at the exact moment that they're supposed to be exactly at all times, and they all operate in that type of harmony. There is no distortion. There is no kink. And there's this, I feel my imaginal cells like wanting to bond together, you know?
Mm.
And even conceptually, it's like, well, fuck, if I want to experience heaven, then I need to get rid of the kink within myself. There's no other work to do. It's not like, let me just keep it to myself until I die and then I'll go to heaven. Because it's not like when I take the suit off, all of a sudden, all of the fear just disappears or it goes away. I mean, maybe it does, you know, but there's nowhere else to go. And there's no other time but now. So there's just this work of sharing the truth. Because if we hold back, but then there's also the balance of that doesn't mean you just have to tell everybody everything about you and all, I don't have to just have videos of me walking around naked. There's still some elements of it. So there's a line, but I think there's something for me personally about this fear of being judged
Mm.
or of not being accepted or of being rejected. And it's it's so much better than it used to be. But
Do you
it's
think
still there.
uniquely in that form? Like if I reframe that or rephrase that a little bit, would it be a yes or no? Let me ask you, okay?
Mhm.
Do you have a fear of not being good enough? Is that the same fear, or is that a
It could,
different?
it could, well, I think it all leads to the same place.
Absolutely. I think all these core wounds or these patterns definitely lead back, but I think they also have a slightly different, unique expression at each kind of interval of the turning of the wheel.
Sure. Oh, yeah, yeah. I think they definitely do. Yeah, they
A
have their own.
different flavor of kink. Like there's a
Totally.
chocolate kink and a vanilla kink and a cookie cream kink.
Yeah. Cookie cream
Cookies
king.
and cream.
My energetic hose has a cookies and cream kink.
You just said my energetic hose. And I was like, what?
Oh, man, I'm a cosmic pimp and I got some energetic hose.
That's right. That's some energetic Twinkies.
My energetic hose.
I was at the store yesterday or the day before, and they had a food item I hadn't seen. It was called no name cake, and it was wrapped. It was wrapped in tinfoil, and it was chocolatey and it had a creamy middle. And I was like, that no name cake looks a lot like something that I know the name of.
Mm.
That's a ding dong.
Mm.
By any other name, that's a ding dong. And it was called no name cake. And I was like, what? I don't know. Looks
it-
like a ding dong.
Was it local? Was it like a local brand?
I couldn't tell. I mean, I don't even remember which store I was at when I saw this, but I'm gonna remember very shortly here. It was in the last couple days. But I had to call out that performative contradiction.
Yeah, I had I put up a video on Instagram yesterday or socials, and I sent it to a lot of people directly. And it just said, I love you. Pass it on. That was it. And there was the part of me, and I think I put a tag of like, let's reach 1 million or something. And there was the part of me, I'd all like those different voices, part of my board, that thought, oh, this is such a, like one part would say, this is such a great idea. How love, like, just share some love, put it out. Wonderful. And another one thought, this is really clever. What a great way. This could go viral. People could catch up to this. And then sharing it, some people thought, oh, are you going to tell that person that you love them? Like, do you think it'll be awkward? And then another voice would say, well, if you just send this to people, they're not going to feel like it's personal. And they're going to think they're just like you're spamming them, and because you're sending it to everybody. For all these different voices swirling. But the experience was I put it up and I sent it directly to, I just went through Instagram. I sent it to most people, but some I didn't send it to. So without going into who I didn't send it to or what the reasons were, I'm acknowledging the fact that there was something that I felt afraid, if or hesitant for whatever the reason is. There was a reason that I chose, no, I won't send it to that person. And so that's still in the space, but I sent it to a lot. And I got a lot of people that wrote back. And it was lovely. Some people didn't write back. Some people would just heart it and just say, yeah. Some people would write back, I love you too. And it's like, But it was really cool because like some people I knew, some were old friends, some were new friends, some were casual friends, some were deep friends.
Hmm.
And one of the people that wrote actually commented on my post on Facebook, guy I went to high school with, and essentially said, this word gets thrown around too much. Love. Like, we got to find a new word because we say it and like, I'd have to go read it exactly, but he's like, look, love, if somebody loves me, that means they're going to like, if I need their help, they'll drop everything. They'll come and help me. They'll like be there and all these things. And it's like, we throw it, but we don't actually, take the action. So the heart of it that I took was, that it's an empty word for a lot of people. And so what I shared with him was, I agree that for a lot of people, it's empty. And I don't think we could get enough of it. And so it's just the substrate of existence itself. And that's when so I'm coming back thinking about the words and the semantics about finding a different word, which made me think about, well, the Greeks had 8 different words for love. So you could get into the semantics of it, of what type of love you're talking about. But it's also a fair question. Some people will say, well, you don't really mean it. You don't really love me. So don't say it. You're not going to you wouldn't show up for me. If I asked you for something, you wouldn't help me. And that's a fair point. But also, we're so disconnected from saying, I love you. So many of us, just putting that into the zeitgeist, putting that through the hose. But I found myself, it was a practice for me to just help to take the crink out of my hose as much as I could, to just do that and know like it's okay, and it's not like I'm saying horrible things, but saying I love you. But that was an interesting thing to go through and see what the interaction was. And so that's part of the like truth of just sharing, speaking, being open, not worried. Like when I had my newsletter previously, the first thing I would always do, I think I might have told you this, the first thing after sending a newsletter, I would always check the unsubscribes. Not just how many, but who. And then thinking about that person, or like, oh, that person, and have this icky feeling. And there's the part of me with this upcoming newsletter to think, I'm not even going to look. It doesn't matter. It's not for them. So I don't care. And I don't want to have any noise or second guessing or thinking about this person or that person because they didn't want to subscribe to my newsletter. And then there's another part of me that thinks, oh, so you're avoiding it by not, but any of those blocks, any of those holds, any of those feelings is a block to experiencing what we would call heaven, because there is none of that in heaven. And so that's what I'm interested in when I'm in the deep part of my soul that's saying, tell the truth, because it wants to go home.
What is your truth?
I don't know that I have one answer.
It's a different question. The question, what is truth? And the question, what is your truth? Have wildly different frames to them.
Could almost argue that the word your makes it a performative contradiction, because your means it is a subjective. Whatever you're going to say after delineates it as it could also not be yours.
Well, let's say you had a gambling addiction, right? And somebody asked that person when they got up to the pearly gates, "Hey, you had a good life. Like, tell me about your life. And what was your truth?" And that person didn't want to admit that they had had a gambling addiction, or like something that was clearly part of their story or their truth or their, you know, dharma on this earth. Like, don't people have a unique kind of expression of their own path in life? And I'm
Absolutely.
saying that because
Yeah.
we can dismiss personal truth. We could say it doesn't really matter. It's just personal. But to say that it doesn't exist, like, I do think people have like personal triumphs or personal disasters or personal things to go through. That's their unique shit to go through.
Mm. And I would agree with that and could argue that the only thing that exists is personal truth. Because for something to be an absolute universal truth, it has to be true for everything and everyone. And if there was a universal truth, there could only be one. And that is the law of one. That there's just one. Anything outside of one becomes subjective.
Well, sure. And the multiplicity of truths, or the truth of the color yellow and the truth of the color red, have a different vibrancy on the spectrum. Like,
Mhm.
you can draw the sun red on a piece of paper, but it connotes something very different than a yellow sun.
Mhm.
You know what I mean by that? Like, a red sun has all these crazy different connotations than like a normal day sun, which most people would see as white or yellow, or either all the colors of the rainbow or it's some yellow hue.
It has
Right?
a different frequency.
Right. But a red sun is like a sun you might see in the morning or at sunset, or if there's a fire, you would see a red sun. It's like a very different, it's connoting a very different element of truth.
Mhm. But here's the thing. Did the sun change colors?
Maybe
If there's a fire, did the sun change colors?
if we are seeing the sun through the spectrum of smoke, we are perceiving it different because there's actually clouds of some substrate in between the sun
Yes.
shining and our eyes perceiving.
Right.
And there's such a thing as red giants that are stars in their later phases of evolution, and they literally shine with more of a hue of red.
Sure, but the sun itself, and it just even shows where we can say, "Oh, that's a red sun." We perceive the sun
Well,
as
no,
red.
it's not just our perception. It's our ability to measure it using spectra of differentiation.
Well, I'm talking about when there's smoke in front of the
Right,
sun.
right, right, right.
Yeah. So, or we see things, we think, "Oh, that's what it is." But there's other people that would look at the exact same sun and it wouldn't look red to them. And they would look at the exact same sun at the exact same time, just from a different coordinate of space.
That's kind of the elephant analogy.
Mhm.
But
And so there's what is the truth? I guess the universal truth is there's a sun, but I can't be as sure as that as I am sure of the truth that I see a red sun. And so for us to express and share our personal truth without fear of rejection or judgment or punishment, that's a beautiful world to live in. It's the kind of relationships that I want. relationships where you can share things with people and they're not going to be like, you're a fucking idiot. I don't know that I've necessarily
But
said that.
What if that's their truth?
It is, yeah,
Call you a
right.
fucking idiot.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
fine because I'd probably done that as well.
Well, but like, you probably have a circle of brothers or people in your life that can call you out on your bullshit, or they're just that's just their personality, is to like tell people that they're full of shit.
Yeah,
You know what I mean by that? They're just salty by nature.
totally.
So it's part of their charm that they call you bad names and curse at you and tell you you're full of shit. It's part of why you
Totally.
love them.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
No, I hear what you're saying though about personal truth. Like, on the one hand, I don't like the ideologies or the versions of postmodernity that just want to just frame everything as subjective all the time and therefore no truth exists, because what fills that vacuum is always somebody else's inflated ego or neuroses or power machinations. But what you are getting at about this idea that the personal truth is actually more important, I think there's something really profound there, because I would rather be around a lot of people that were like on a journey to own their own personal truth,
Yeah.
because we have a lot more control over our own personal truth than over whatever you might describe as a universal truth, or
Yeah.
get into the macrocosmos a bit more with it. It doesn't really
Yeah.
matter. Like, I don't know that the physics of the sun shining or the number of slaves on the planet at this moment of time, like, those truths might have some objective truth elements to them, but they pale in comparison to me knowing my own truth and showing up as the best version of myself, or owning my own flaws, or owning my own genius. Because those are dimensions that I can personally control and touch and affect through my disposition, through my attitude, through my yearning, through my inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a famous line in Shakespeare. Laertes says to his son, "To thine own self be true."
Mm-hmm.
And what was the inscription above the gates of the Temple of Apollo?
Please take your shoes off.
Please take your shoes off. And also, know thyself.
Hmm.
And if your feet smell, keep your shoes on.
No public bathroom. So I think that's what's happening here, but it's all connected. That's all connected with the experience of being alive and dying, and the apocalypse and the uncovering and the unveiling and what you believe in, creating your experience and removing fear. And so, and there's also guidelines or rules within our systems and our culture of how you operate as well. And so there's this, I'm feeling this phase of this next evolution of both like release and creation.
What is your truth?
I and my Father are one.
Do you know the story of the father of Tutankhamun, the famous Egyptian prince / pharaoh?
I don't.
His name was Akhenaten, and he was a heretic. He rejected the stories and the gods of his fathers and his forefathers before him. And he had a vision of a mystical sun that was the only thing. And he created a new religion. And he moved the capital of Egypt from Memphis, where it was, to a new city in the desert. And he married Nefertiti. And I'm sure he had other concubine wives, and there was even incest in their bloodstream galore because they all tried to have sex with each other and not,
Were they like bonobo monkeys?
I mean, they were literally like, I mean, when they start doing genetic analysis of some of these pharaohs and their kin and their brothers and sisters and their sons and their daughters, they all were clearly having sex with each other. And even Tutankhamun, the boy king, was probably somehow manipulated by some of the other power players, whether it was uncles or princes or Jafar. I know you haven't seen Aladdin, but I'll keep making references until you do see it. Anyway, Akhenaten, whatever his name was like erased from history because after he died, the other power structures came back so forcefully they wanted to erase him from the map because he tried to, say, oh, these old gods and these old traditions, they're not real, they don't exist. And he tried to like bring forth this vision of like a one all mystical sun. And it lasted as long as he did. One of the things that his son did, the boy king Tutankhamun, is he basically brought the old religions back. And it's not clear if he truly was the person that was doing this or if, again, he was getting immense pressure from either the priesthood or other power players in the kingdom who were really pulling the strings. I'm sharing this because there's something about the energetic feeling the texture that I'm hearing of your focus on this one frame, this one phraseology, this one insight of the Bible, and your retelling of it and your reframing of it. It's reminding me of this heretic king. And there's like beautiful inscriptions of like the vision of the mystical sun. It's like a form of monotheism before you could even put a name to it,
There's just, Yeshua teaches, there's just one sun, and we are it. The teachings that are attributed to Jesus, when he says, I and my Father are one, he might as well just say, repeat after me. He doesn't say, I and my Father are one, and then we say, you and your Father are one. We say, I and my Father are one. And so he was the messenger. He was a messenger. He was a messenger of the law of one. And then not only did we kill the messenger, we made the messenger the Godhead. My increasing and growing connection to Yeshua feels like a performative contradiction to what we know him to be. Because he is saying there is nothing between you and God. And then Christianity put him between you and God.
Well, they also put the church in between you and God, and the authorities of the church in between you and God, and a book called the Bible between you and God.
Yeah, all of it, of it. And he as the figurehead of that, which feels like the antithesis. Like, I don't know how those two things can be true. in the
Well-
same story.
Are you familiar with the story of Martin Luther or the Reformation or the book on liberty?
Not so much.
Well, in general strokes, historically, as the Roman Catholic Church rose to prominence, because there were many other different forms of Christianity, and there still are today, with totally different roots and ancestries than the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, which is really grew out of the Roman Empire and the Flavian dynasty of Vespasian and Titus and Josephus. I mention that because, even the Germanic tribes that overthrew the Roman Empire, they were Christians. They practiced a different type of Christianity. It's called Arianism. And Arianism lost out in the battle of ideas of history. And the Roman Catholic Church ideology, by the way, Catholic means universal, won out on the Western stage, right? And the Greek Orthodox Church is a different branched out derivation that splintered off into its own winterlands. But then there's all these other churches too. But in the Western Church, right, with the Council of Nicaea around 400, whatever AD, I forget, a few hundred years after Christ, they canonized the books of the religion. They said, these are the real books that have the real teachings of Jesus, and all these other ones aren't really the real books. But why did that council get to decide what are the real books? And I'm mentioning all this because when Martin Luther came around, he basically challenged the church dogma of the time. Like, I think you could buy your way into heaven by just giving enough money to the church. Oh, they're like, oh, if you give us even more money, we'll make sure you get the fast track to heaven. It was like the Clear Line or the TSA Pre of its time. But you don't have to stand in this line to get to heaven or do all these good deeds. If you just do this one good deed of giving us more money,
Yeah.
you'll go directly to heaven. So the church was full of all these hypocrisies and contradictions, and who knows what else was going on there. But Martin Luther came along and he really just changed the game in the Western world, because here's what he said: there is no thing between you and God. Like you can form a direct relationship with the divine. And yeah, maybe the intermediary was the Bible. Maybe there was layers of intermediaries that were still part of his teachings, but it truly created this schism in the Western Roman Church, because all of a sudden now you have the Church of England, you have all these other churches and all these other denominations, and it became this wild flowering of a different way to practice Christianity, which was to form a direct relationship with Jesus Christ. And Martin Luther was a genius. You would really love his books, especially the book on liberty. Also a raging anti-Semite. I was thinking about Henry T. Ford today. Amazing inventor, innovator, just totally changed American culture. Also a Nazi, loving anti-Semite. Can they be a genius and beautiful and also dark and terrible all in one?
The law is one. There's only one. All of us have the capacity of everything.
So on the other side of the universal is the particular. And they always come together. And I mention that because for every time you say the law is one, the law is also many. And every time we try to claim a universal truth, there's also a particular context in which you're raising that truth. Historical and personal.
The law is, my truth is that the truth is that the law is one.
What insight did that help? What was that when you say that as a revelation in your own personal story and journey? Tell me the problem that solved when you had that realization. What was the inquiry or frame that had a problem, and then all of a sudden you realize everything is one?
What the fuck are we supposed to do? What are we doing here?
What are you doing here?
Right now, I'm stimming. I'm sending about 98 milliamps of electricity pulsing through my legs. I'm live streaming with you,
Mm.
and we're joined by, we have friends on Instagram. 3 people have joined us, but they're not here anymore, but they were.
Here's an interesting idea. When you say to someone, I love you, or if you send out this message on Instagram, what if there was such a great way you could say I love you, such a compelling way, such a perfect way you could like literally cultivate inside of you all that amazing energetic capacitor of your brilliance to say I love you to somebody, but when you say I love you, it is actually like transferred through the waves of space time to that other person who receives it, and they feel your love in that moment. Could you say I love you so well to somebody with your Instagram reach out to DMing and stuff like that, that you actually start like creating a ripple through space time of love?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I did. For some. Because some people received that and felt a lot of love. And they were like, I love you too.
Well, but
I'm
did you
so
mean it when you said it?
Yeah.
Like sort of you meant it? Or you were just like playing around on Instagram, sending people DMs saying I love you?
I just recorded myself saying, I love you, pass it on. And I shared it. And it was a short little video.
So one video, and then you shared that
I
video.
made a video that was 3 seconds long that said, I love you, pass it on.
When you recorded that in that moment, were you feeling like so on fire with love, like your cells were vibrating at the attunement of love, and you're like, I love you, pass it on?
I was not to that extreme,
Mm.
but I definitely felt love.
Mm.
But I felt many things. I felt love. I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is great. This feels good," as I was saying earlier, and it felt clever. And it all the different voices, what aspect of me was perceiving it? And then which one did I would choose to put my energy, but love itself was absolutely present. Absolutely. As was cleverness and fear and consideration and judgment and surrender. All of those were popped up at various points.
Mm.
But absolutely. And the way that people responded to the message was their perception of me and the message I sent them. And
Mm.
whatever they were experiencing, in whatever way they were experiencing it, in whatever way they experienced me, led to them feeling whatever they felt and responding however they responded. And the work is to recognize that none of that has anything to do with me. And everything, but also nothing.
Because it's not your truth.
But kind of like what Rick Rubin talks about. Somebody asked him about, how much do you consider the audience when you're making art? And his answer was none.
I call bullshit. Rick Rubin.
So he said, it's not that that isn't something. That's something, but that's not art. That's commerce.
Bullshit. When a comedian goes on stage and they're doing their art, which is comedy, do you think they listen to whether or not people are laughing when they perform their comedy?
Sure. But also, do they and will they make adjustments? But if you're in the studio working with a band or you're making music, what he says is if you're thinking while you're making the music, you're thinking about how other people will think of this, then it takes you away. What art is you making the thing that you most want to make at that moment, that is most maybe satisfying or expressive of you to what you feel and what you like. And what happens after that, it's none of your business.
That is the words of a control freak who doesn't actually understand the art process fully, trying to manipulate you into thinking that other people don't have anything to do with art. Art belongs to all of us in this interconnected framework. If you were to perform a song to the woman that you were in love with, you would actually perform that song so much more beautifully than if you just performed it or didn't have a reason to perform it or didn't have love moving through you in the same way. I don't want to say like in an empty room, because maybe you performed it brilliantly when nobody was watching, but like other people are part of the participation of art.
Sure. Well, but like even I think about when he was recording, he told a story of recording
It's such a Gen X take on art. That's my take on it. That like the Gen X people wanted to always try to do things for its own sake, right? Lishma, as they say in Hebrew, for its own sake, because they didn't like commerce. But like even the frame around commerce is a bad frame, because you want your art to be impactful, and you want it to be impactful to as many souls as you can reach, which is what business is. Business wants to create impact, and it can create a ecosystem of sustainability of whatever genre it's working within. They're not two, business and art. They're actually one, like the law of one. They're just different manifestations of a different truth.
they're not mutually exclusive.
Absolutely not.
And when you're making your art, excuse me, like let's just say, for example, I'm making a video and I write or say what I say, and it's like this is what I want to say. This feels really good. This feels the most authentic to me. And I just want to express myself in the most authentic way. And then I think, I wonder if maybe I'm using too many F words, F bombs. Maybe I should take some out. And I'm like, yeah, because, well, if somebody else sees this, or maybe I should shift that. Now I'm actually taking away from the fullest, most true expression in consideration for the commerce aspect of it.
Well, what does commerce have to do with it?
Because I am shifting it based on the desire for greater receptivity.
Commerce is culture. It's the I versus the we. And what you're describing, and I understand what you're getting at, and I understand what Rick Rubin's getting at, but what you're describing is just somebody that doesn't have the confidence in their own integrity of their own voice, which is it's its own problem to deal with on the journey of making good art. But nobody wants to make bad art, right? Like weak art, like superficial art. And if you're merely worried about what everybody thinks of you, then you're going to make superficial or weak art, or like not
Yeah, that's exactly what he's saying.
right. But he's taking it too far. Or, I mean, he knows this too, that the opposite is also true, right? Like, we don't just make art for ourselves. It's a communicative medium. We are communicating with the universe. We are in vibration. And when we are in vibration in our strongest voice, other people will be receptive to that vibration, because you're speaking truth. You're speaking your truth. You're turning yourself into an instrument of the divine.
Yes, 100%. That is a consequence, a potential consequence. But whether that happens or not, the important thing is that we speak our truth. And that we shouldn't change our truth with the consideration of how it will be received.
There's only the consideration of how it will be received. It is a continuum of community in which we perform art. And I'm saying that you can't pretend like you can just turn yourself into an island. Like, yes, we should do things for its own sake. I acknowledge that. Lishma, for its own sake. We should make art for its own sake. And we should make art that resonates inside this community container, because we're actually creating resonance.
Yeah, I agreed. But we also want to share it. We want to share our art, but while we're creating it, we're creating what is most true for us. This thing that wants to be birthed.
You will understand the thing that is most true to you in the reflection of the way people are receiving it. You'll realize you're resonating at your highest vibrancy when you feel people inside of the space. It's like you'll realize that people are inside of you and you are inside of other people when you're making your most magical art. And again, this is like a Gen X critique. Gen X hated commerce and thought commerce destroyed art, and they didn't want anybody to sell out. And so did the 60s.
How many artists died penniless? How many of our great artists did not have any success while they were alive?
Well, who's a famous one? Like, what's the impressionist painter? The Van Gogh. Van Gogh died penniless. He was not famous while he was living.
Right.
But he made great art.
Right. Exactly.
Right. But I'm not talking about commerce. Commerce is culture. Like, they're not against each other. Like you said,
what I'm saying is that he wasn't getting the feedback, the resonance of people connecting with it.
I mean, you say that, but I bet you there are people that absolutely knew Van Gogh was a genius artist in his life.
Some, of course, yeah, of course there were
Right.
some.
But
Right.
that's not,
But if he said, you know what? People aren't really vibing with what I'm creating. Maybe I should do something different. Then we wouldn't have gotten the art he created. If he had taken into consideration the fact that he's not having commercial success, then he wouldn't have made the art that now is the most impactful art on the planet.
but you're turning this into a conversation about commerce. But that's not the point. I mean, they're just different things. Like, yes, he should make art for his own sake, and he did. He loved art, and he painted, and he made art. He turned things into objects of beauty, and he created a crystallization of a focalization of a paint and light and color into objects that many people today consider to be beautiful. But the audience, including Van Gogh as the first member of an audience, is like participating in that art. They're not cut off. The art is not an island. He is not an island. And it's a lie that we say to ourselves as artists that we're just doing it for its own sake, because we're also doing it for each other. Meaning, for you to speak your greatest truth, for you to show up as the greatest vibrancy of your art, is to also step into the container of the most brilliant community of light that exists.
That's why we share it.
But the act of sharing it is part of the artistic process. It's not cut off from it. And again, I want to speak to this from the point of like singing a song. When you sing a song to people, like a different part of you comes out, and you even more step into your vulnerability and or your greatness. Without the audience being there, you never quite get to that level of just oomph. That's why I'm saying bullshit to Rick Rubin, even though I think he's a genius, and I also think he knows kind of what I'm saying to also be true, because everything is also the opposite. So I'm just taking the other side of the coin here, but I'm also speaking to my own personal journey with art. And also I'm like right on the border between the Gen X generation and what came after. I don't know if you call it millennials or something else. And in my early days, I just wanted to create art for its own sake. I was very committed and devoted to that cause. So I very much see eye to eye with what I hear you saying. And I think there's something else. I think we have to include people as impacting other beings as part of our art. And I think we need to attune to the reception that people have to our art as part of how and why we make art. And I think the people that want to cut off the audience as being part of the artistic process are actually fearful and holding on to that last residue of fear when they make their art by pretending like other people aren't there to judge them.
The audience is, but there is no, it's all subjective. It's all perspective.
Great. And there's artists that create more impactful art. There are artists that create greater art.
And look at Jesus.
Look at Jimi Hendrix. Was he a great artist?
Some people say so.
But a lot of people around the world would say, you know what, that guy actually was a great guitar player. He could really turn that instrument into a incredible.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of people hated it. And it's a good thing he didn't consider those people when he was making his art.
Right. But he absolutely did consider the people that heard the voice of his guitar as a form of music and heard it as a form of genius. And those fans fanned on the flames of his stardom, meaning he wouldn't have become the most beautiful expression of Jimi Hendrix without also receiving the love and adulation of his fans and the people, the listeners that were participating in that story of art.
Sure. Van Gogh wouldn't have been Van Gogh if people didn't start to collectively shift their beliefs or viewpoints of what he created. What Rick Rubin's talking about is, as best we can, to be as truthful and honest with ourselves and what we want to say in our expression at that moment, without being concerned of what people are going to, is this the best thing that I could make?
Right. But that is the whisper that he's whispering in the ears of people that are afraid to fully say their art out loud. It's what he's saying to people like you that have fear of judgment, and as one of their core wounds that they're working through to create their great art. But it's also a lie. Just as every great truth is also a lie.
It's just a perspective.
It's more than that. It's the whisper that artist needs to hear to gear their art up to the next level. And I'm glad we're having this conversation, because in a way I want to say to you that with your art, your voice needs to be heard by millions of people. And I don't want you to be afraid of the strength of your voice or to have the confidence to fully embody that voice by ignoring the audience.
Well, the more, but it's like the kind of thing of, it comes back to like the unsubscribes. I can't worry about the unsubscribes.
Correct.
It's not for them.
Right. And see the light in the eyes of the people that are tuning into your message because they're reflecting back to you the God that you are and vice versa.
Yeah, 100%. But when I write or when I make it, I need to do it so that I know that I can be fully self-expressed and absolutely recognize and honor how it could be beneficial or support others and want to make those connections. But not to fall into the path of like, oh, well, I'm going to make this because it's going to, and you can have ambition, I think, I want to reach millions of people or do these sorts of things. That's great. But you got to make art so that your soul can express itself. And you never, to get to the point where we can speak our raw, vulnerable, honest truth. Even sometimes if it might not be popular, but it's most true for us.
There are a lot of people that make art, and all those arts are true forms of expression. And there are people that make great art. And great art is people that pull from their soul a different level of just genius to create unique patterns or forms of light and or sound and or resonance and or story. And they pull people up in this fabric of fucking awesomeness.
Yeah.
And you're one of those people.
Yeah. Thanks. So far, my Instagram videos would disagree with you. But I really like how they look. I like the way they're coming out. Now, it's also just, getting in the process, like to make, but for me to make this shit because that's where it's like, it's all an inside game. Because if I make it and I share it and I put it up and I'm like, I feel really good. I really wanted to say that. And I shared it. And I said it.
What else do you want to do that feels really good, that feels like you're making your art?
I don't understand.
Well, taking one step at a time, right? Just the power of the infinitesimal. One tiny step at a time. Yesterday or the day before, you made one video where you said, I love you, and share it. But follow that intuition. What's the next step in that great artistic voice coming through you?
Well, I want to do the newsletter. I want to write more. I want to create more digital products. And that's commerce, but it's also art to teach. I want to, just share.
The first newsletter, I haven't read yet. Tell me about it. What came through for you? Was there something crystallized when you sit down and put pen to paper that you're like, oh, this is great, this is coming through? Or was it like pulling teeth? Is there a message that crystallized through the act of writing, or are you just
Yeah, there was. As I wrote, more came through. It was more fluid, more flowing. It's pretty decent size. There's a lot in it, but the overarching thing is me speaking my truth, whatever that is. It's a stand-up comedian. It's fucking Andy Kaufman going up and doing the bongos or Mighty Mouse because that's what he wanted to do. It's what felt true, it felt right for him to be able to do that. And inside of it, there's lots of things that I said that I believe are true. But the binding piece of it was me saying it. Me saying it itself was the greatest truth of what I said. And that's, I think, even how in the beginning of it, I started by saying something like, Um, here, I'll just read you the beginning. I said a little bit first, but I said, there's so much I want to share that it's hard to know where to begin. So I'll start with a confession. I haven't been truthful with you. It's not that I've lied to you. I just haven't told you the truth. The deep, raw, vulnerable, mask off, God honest truth. And while I don't have to share it, the truth is that I want to. And no offense, it's not really for you, it's for me. And then whatever I said, I said. I said a lot. But that to me is the thing that was most true.
But there's a performative contradiction in what you just said. You just shared out loud with other people the truth that's only, you just said the truth is only for me, but I'm going to share it out loud for
No,
everybody.
I didn't say it's not for you. I said the reason I'm sharing it for me, but the reason of course, what is inside of it, I want to share. There's the pieces I want to connect and share and teach and connect and do all those things, but I want to heal. I want to release my fear.
Mm.
And so if I send that newsletter out, and if every single person unsubscribes, I will have succeeded. And if every single person forwards it to 10 friends and says, you have to read this, this is the most incredible thing I've ever read, I will have succeeded. The receptivity of the audience is a different thing than me saying what I felt I needed to say or wanted to say. That is true to itself, regardless of what happens after I press send.
What's the difference between mediocre art and great art? Flaccid art versus potent and powerful art.
I don't know that I don't know how to answer that and just but I think there's an authenticity. I think the best art is truly, truly great art is authentic to whoever's creating it. So, yeah. So I'm glad to just get that going. But I'm going to need to go to sleep soon because it's almost 2:00 here. I'm winding down.
I think it's really interesting that you started the email with the word truthfulness, because we had a whole episode about truth. What is truth? But you just framed it so differently by using the word truthfulness as opposed to truth.
Did I say the word truthfulness in the
email?
I said truthful.
Truthful, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The gratefulness, the truthfulness.
Well, a claim of truthfulness or if somebody's being truthful is a very different frame or way to think about truth, right? Because if somebody's like lying to you, they're not being truthful, right? It's a very different way to think about truth than, is this a square?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's the call. That's what I've been coming through is tell the truth. It's essentially tell your truth. Yeah. So we'll see. And I want to, like, in a space of creation and impact, I want it to resonate. I want to connect with people. I want to grow. I want to build my brand. I want to build my, I want to sell my courses. I want to coach. I want to do this work. I want to 100%. But you can only serve one master. So they're not mutually exclusive. And there is a value and a benefit. So many of us do the things and make the things that we think how other people will respond. And whether we're happy with it or not happy with it or proud of it or if we'll share it or not is like, well, what are other people going to think about it?
What's the truth beyond that insight? Because that insight has been spoken. It's the insight that belonged to the generation of artists that came before us.
Well, I think the truth is that we're safe. That it's just healing the separation. That we're already forgiven. And getting to an experiential place of that.
That's really powerful.
The truth is to remember. I want to remember, but I also want everybody. I would not want every one of us to remember, but I also have to remember. And I can't actually be the embodiment of remembrance if I don't tell the truth, because then I would be a living performative contradiction. I can't, if I say I remember, but I'm not telling the truth, then I don't remember. I haven't remembered. The obstacle is the way. Telling the truth is the access to heaven. It's the key. And I think I probably talked about that. But whether that's true or not is what I'm experiencing as my truth. And whether other people want to hear it or not, I'm sure some people, I am sure, I would say with the utmost confidence, that I will have some people that will think, God blessed me on this day to receive this email. And others will unsubscribe. I know, I'm very confident that both of those things will happen. But we'll see. But I want to continue to tell the truth. But I also I want to create, I just want to enjoy, like, I want to and then I still want the same things of I want to lead an extraordinarily joyful and, loving, connected, alive life.
I just heard the word infinite differently for the first time. That it's infinite.
Mm. Mm-hmm. It's all just a big paradox.
I spent a long time meditating on the difference between paradox and paradise.
Mm.
I love the double entendre of paradise and pair of dice.
Mm-hmm. And pair of ducks and pair of ducks. This guy goes into a shrink and says, "Doctor, I've been having the craziest fucking dreams. I don't know what to do. One night, I think I'm a teepee, and the next night, I think I'm a wigwam, and then a teepee and a wigwam and a teepee and a wigwam. I can't handle it." He said, "Calm down. You're too tense."
That's one of my favorite jokes of all time.
Hmm.
I think about that joke a lot
How often do you think about it?
inside of my head.
Hmm.
A lot. I don't know why.
Hmm.
Maybe it's the two. Maybe because it's the same joke of the paradise versus paradox.
Yeah, yeah. It's a good joke. Welcome to the infinite.
I do want to say something
Hmm.
before we go to bed, which is I got to see a new movie with my father. Don't know how many movies we're going to get to see together, so I tried to cherish it. And it was a great movie, or maybe a terrible movie. It was The Great Unknown with Timothy Chalamet and the Bob Dylan story,
Complete unknown.
The Complete Unknown.
A complete unknown.
A Complete Unknown.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to share that I felt a personal connection to that story, if only because one of my professors in college was this guy named D.A. Pennebaker. And D.A. Pennebaker is one of those people in the history of cinema that's written into the history books. He helped create a genre of filmmaking called cinema verite, meaning cinema as truth. And the idea was, let's be a fly on the wall and we'll just film things however they happen to be. And D.A. Pennebaker was one of the first guys to figure out how to put a recording microphone onto a camera that you could take out in the field and just be there and film things, hear things, capture things in their naked unfolding. And he decided to make a movie with this new technology about a guy named Robert Zimmerman. Is that his name?
I think so.
Bob Dylan. And it's the most famous movie ever made about Bob Dylan. Until maybe this one. And it's called Don't Look Back. And it follows Bob Dylan in the heyday of a lot of these story points that the new movie covers. But there's one moment in particular in this movie that I wanted to share because it actually captures the essence of the heart of the dialogue that we are having today about what is art, what is great art. There's a singer named Donovan who was a contemporary of Bob Dylan. In fact, there's even a line in the new Timothy Chalamet movie where they kind of shit on Donovan. And I laughed out loud knowing that Donovan is also in this other movie with Bob Dylan. And here's the story as I received it and I remember it. And I probably told you this before, but I'm going to say it again out loud for the universe, for the infinite. So they're backstage. I don't know if they're in a green room or they're in somebody's living room. I think they're backstage, maybe of a venue. And they're all kind of sitting around. And this is the 60s, you know. And then Donovan's like, hey, I wrote a song. You guys want to hear it? And he like plays a song. And it's all just captured there by D.A. Pennebaker's magic. It's like capturing the moment in the 60s where people were just like, I wrote a song. You want to hear it? And Donovan starts to sing. And literally my heart just opens because I'm like, oh my gosh, this was the era. This was the age. This was the olam where people just made art out loud together and shared art with each other. Like this was the era of making art out loud. It's so beautiful, the 60s. I mean, they're like explosion of culture and community and expression that was the 60s. And Donovan sings this beautiful song. And I don't remember the name of the song. I couldn't tell you how it goes, but I just remember thinking, what a beautiful song. Wow, that guy Donovan, he's so fucking talented. And then you know what happens next? Bob Dylan plays a song. Bob Dylan plays a song. And it's so much fucking better than Donovan. It's on a wildly different level. And I'm not shitting on Donovan, but I'm saying that Bob Dylan created art from a different place in his soul that spoke and resonated to people on an even deeper level.
Mm-hmm.
And it's obvious right there on the screen, the naked screen, the cinema verite.
He did, and that was the things that I'm saying here and what brought into that newsletter. I think I probably wrote it the night after I watched that movie.
And Bob Dylan in that movie, when he's talking to one of his love interests in the movie, the other folk singer, what's her name?
Joan Baez.
Joan Baez. And he kind of takes a shit on her. He's like, you're making superficial art. He's like, do you remember that line in the movie where he kind of...
Yeah, that was the big takeaway I got from him, was like, he didn't give a shit. He still wanted to make great art and he wanted to share it with people, but he didn't care how it was received. But he also knew it was great. He also wanted to be great. He was more interested in being great than he was in being famous.
I agree with that. And I would also say he was more interested in being great than merely being good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He wanted to move past the tropes and the familiar ways we could express art, which there's validity in those expressions of art. And then there's even more powerful resonances and even more powerful art that can come out of our soul. And it's wild and it's unknown because we can't really control it, right? We have to totally surrender in service of our art, which is really service to community.
And in that you have to be completely open. You can't put up the barriers. And to me, that's what is resonant when I'm saying to tell the truth. I ended the newsletter by talking about David and Michelangelo.
I'm fascinated now because I wouldn't know what parallel you could draw with David. Usually when people talk about David, they're always talking about this style of art when you start with a big piece of stone or marble and then you whittle it down until David's left over.
I said Michelangelo, the sculptor, not the Ninja Turtle, said he did not carve the statue of David, but simply removed the stone around him to reveal that the angel was already there. That's my plan. We don't need to find the good God. We just need to remove all the layers we've created to block our awareness that it is already here. Welcome to the infinite. I'm happy to be here with you. Just remember. So that's the work. Good day. There will be no music to take us out. Yeah. Cool. Well, it's good to get back in the saddle. Okay, and live video. And then